Well, hello. How are we going? Thank you for bringing the excitement. Look, I have no idea what I'm doing up here. No, just kidding, it's fine. It's fine. Welcome to Days of Future Past, not IP infringing whatsoever. If there's anyone here from Disney, it's fine, you didn't see this. It's all good. So, my name is Kelsey Gamble. I am a long-time community manager. I started in this industry 12 years ago, which is really upsetting to me. I shouldn't be that old, but here we are. I started out my career at EB Games. A few of you might have heard of that place. I created the first ever community team there, mostly as a way to just work out how to get more money at that company. It worked out pretty well for me in the end. My career's been filled with everything from working for the government to doing random stuff with shopping centres. I had a brief stint, 5 years, very brief, at Bethesda. I was their community manager for Australia and New Zealand. Also did communications for Asia there. So it's been, in general, a pretty fun ride. But I'm here to kind of attempt to go through the history of community management in games and in the digital space. Now, I realized after I started writing this talk that I have 50 minutes, and that's not enough time. Like, we need like 7 days to do this. So I'm gonna do my best to kind of get through it as quickly as possible. It's gonna be a bit of a like, you know, feeling a lot of punches as we're going through this, and that's fine. That's you know, that's how it feels to be a community manager, so it's kind of all of you on the road with me. At the end, I'm assuming that I'm probably going to go right up to the end, because it's going to be a bit of a race against time. But afterwards, feel free to follow me, kind of squishy, on Twitter, or afterwards I'll be outside if you've got questions like, what the hell was that, Kelsey? Can you explain the first slide again, Kelsey? All those kinds of questions, feel free to hit me up at that point. But let's get started. I'm going to start with a brief recap of community strategy in general, because hopefully that'll serve to inform you as to why I'm kind of like, we need to go back in time and fix this. Spoiler alert. So some of you may have heard of this before. I'm going to assume that some of you haven't. This is the community theory equivalent of the marketing funnel. The idea of a community manager is to go from aware all the way up to advocate. So, you know, you start marketing funnel, you guys know the drill. You might have someone who's kind of like, you know, heard of your game, maybe they'll like them on Facebook. There'll be some really, really low touch people right at the beginning. And the job of a community manager is to get you right on up to advocate. So they're evangelizing your brand for you, they're defending you when things get rough, they're your ride or dies, basically. Now, in the course of a community, that's going to happen naturally, and I'll explain why. But as a community manager, our job is to kind of like create that experience and make as many people as possible community advocates. You'll see the bottom side, the disinterested and detractor. That normally happens when, you know, there's a few reasons, but the main one comes down to identity and, you know, things not fulfilling the needs that someone might potentially have. When we talk about disinterested, it's not really a problem, right? Someone's just, they don't care. They unlike the page, they don't participate in anything, and that's not really a problem. The problem that I'm sure you can all assume as a community manager I experience is when people become detractors. There's lots of different words for it. I say asshole. But ultimately, that's what you want to be trying to prevent. And detractors, again, spoiler alert, bit of a problem that I think we should try and go back in time to fix. So I guess the way that we kind of work in terms of community managers and in terms of community theory is we get them up that curve. But how do we do that? And this is how we do it. Something called the community cycle. This wasn't me, I didn't invent this. This is a CMX hub. So if anybody is interested in really deep diving into community theory, totally recommend that you go and check out that place. But the idea is this is a community cycle, and the intensity of this, it happens over and over again throughout the course of going up that curve. And it increases in intensity every time. As someone gets initiated and moves up, someone who's just at the beginning, you know, cool, they're just jogging along, and then someone who's an advocate, this is going to become really, really important to them. Well, let's go through them. Step one, right up the top, we've got identity. So the idea is the member's identity aligns with the identity of the community. Really self-explanatory, really critical, because if you don't consider yourself a part of a community and your identity isn't aligned, then why the hell are you there in the first place, right? It's kind of considered at the heart of community. They're going to be consciously or unconsciously deciding on these things. And after they join, over time what happens is that identity becomes solidified and it becomes less about you and more about the community that you're a part of. So you start to say us instead of me, for a really easy example. They're going to be way more likely to defend and advocate and do all those sorts of things that I talked about at the beginning if they consider their identity to be part of the many, part of the bigger, wider group. I'm sure you've all seen examples of superfans that their whole identity is that they are that fan. Real great, love it. So the second step is trust. So this one's really also very important, spoiler alert. They develop trust in other members in the community, and they also develop trust in the community as a whole. So without it, people get stuck in the cycle. And so a big part of a community manager's job is to kind of be building that trust. You've got to have both existing in a really strong community because they fuel each other. So when someone's first looking at a opportunity to join a community and they don't see the trust, they'll often become disinterested quite quickly. And then you've got participation, engagement, whatever you want to call it. So very self-explanatory, they're going to take action. And you can't have community without action. And a lot of people go, okay, participation equals watching a Twitch video or commenting or liking or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It doesn't have to mean that someone's streaming your game on Twitch, for example. That's like real advocate level stuff. We're talking about just in general aware. It could just be a case of following the Facebook page. It could just be a case of participating in a conversation where they just nod along about a game. As they become more up that scale, they're going to take participation action that requires more effort. And then you've got your final stage, which is reward. And the idea is that you get value from the participation and you want to do it again. So you get sweet dopamine in your head and it reinforces that cycle for you. It reinforces your identity. It turns it into a cycle in the first place and it keeps it going up through the funnel. And that's why it becomes a cycle. It's great. Typically, participation and reward in the history have been intrinsic in nature, and they're also very extrinsic as well. So everything from you feeling like you're really, really smart and a big Fallout fan, and that being that intrinsic reward that you get, right down to getting a t-shirt for doing something cool. All sorts of different ways to do it. But let's just start at the beginning for a second. Just like first class, let's do it with the power of hindsight though. We've got a few decades worth of hindsight to be able to go through here. So, MUDs, is anybody in this room, did anybody play MUD? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, wow, there's a few people. I was assuming that I would have to explain what it was. We don't. So they're considered the origin of digital communities as we know it. I want to be very clear when I say digital, because obviously communities have been around since the dawn of time. And that's a whole other presentation entirely that we don't have time for today. So digital games communities in particular. A lot of community management theory and a lot of digital community management theory is actually grounded in games. And when I participate in broader community manager conferences and talk to other community managers in the field, a lot of them are really, really interested in what the games industry is doing, because for the longest time we've been the vanguard because it's intrinsically built into how we as games operate. So back in the day, sorry to everyone that used to play MUDs, I'm sure I'm really making you feel good right now. The identity was super, super important. It was the very first thing that you crafted, and it became a part of the world. So it wasn't this, what we've got now with X-Men, for example, a world that's pre-created. You were creating what you're putting out there, and it started with your identity. Trust was implicit in the sense that you knew not to really trust anybody because everyone was anonymous. You knew no one was who they actually were. You knew that it was a fantasy realm, and you didn't need to give or receive trust too much. And in a way, because it was a small, niche, interest-based world, you did have trust that other people were going to be like you, and it was much, not to say that it was bastion of safety, but it was a lot safer back then. And reward was super inherently intrinsic. So you formed friendships, the solidification of the world that you were creating, the universe that you were crafting with other people, all of those things were the rewards. There weren't t-shirts, there weren't, things like that. It was all intrinsic, it was all built inside you. Fun fact on the side, this is where emojis came from, which became shorthand for how we express ourselves, how we communicate with each other, but also how we express our identity. These back at the beginning, it's kind of formed how things exist now, which is very interesting. Again, a talk that I do not have I've got 50 minutes, holy shit. Okay, let's go. So then a lot of this talk is gonna focus on post-2010s, right? Because post-2010, time dilation happens, everything happens at once, it becomes insane. I tried to piece things together post that time, it's just insane. So I want to talk very briefly though about the time pre-2010s because I think it's really important, but it's also, we can breeze through it a lot quicker. Because what happened is things began to get broader and wider, but connection was still the focus. If you think about, Friendster, Club Penguin, all those types of worlds, LiveJournal, your identities weren't just created, they were things that were real at this point. Things were starting to become a little bit more authentic, but it wasn't what it is today. We were still living in a world where that trust was still implicit, things were still a little bit new and together. You had more control over the worlds that you were creating. They were still niche interest based. And so, I like this time of year, life. This, Neopets era, where a lot of us learnt how to code was through living in that universe. And then time dilation happens, things get blurry. Homogenization happens. So instead of us being in little separate rooms, suddenly we're all there. We're all there at the same time. Everything is happening all at once. People were all on Facebook, no matter who we were, and we were all roughly seeing the same things. The human attention span fell. Thanks, New York Times, for showing me that article, really upsetting. World of Warcraft is huge at this point as well. And we've moved away from connection being the primary method and focus of our social platforms to the age of the Facebook's come in, it's overtaken MySpace, it's become all about the numbers, it's become all about engagement. At this point in time, as this is when my career started, it was all about community management was essentially marketing at this point. It wasn't customer service. If it was very few people that were doing it. It was mostly, how can we make this post go viral? How can we make this get as many likes as possible so we can hit as many feeds as possible? And it stopped being about how do you make sure that all these people start connecting with each other really well. In the year 2013, Facebook completely dropped a grenade and decimated organic engagement, but a lot of the structural ways that we think about content as community managers, that we think about social media marketing, kind of happened in this era. This is where it all kind of began, and there's a lot of things that have held on from that time. So just brief aside, talking about memes, I would love to hear, just shout out really loud, when you think the word meme was first coined. 1970, oof, good. Anyone else? Any other guess?
Probably much earlier.
Earlier?
Yeah, I thought it was like 800.
It was the 1800s.
I don't know, I think it's rooted in an
Old word. It was 1976. So it was Richard Dawkins that actually coined it in his book, The Selfish Gene, which I haven't read, but hey, I know the quote. He actually has since said that he's super amused by the way that this word has become something that is what he meant, but in a way that he was not anticipating whatsoever. He uses the word virus a lot, which is topical. Ha ha, good. All right, let's go back to time because, we've got none. It's Intern Era, baby. We have social media managers that are simultaneously at the helm of the ship, running everything, driving like the vanguard of marketing for these giant businesses, but they're also interns for some reason, and they're also really young. Don't get me wrong, this is how my career started, really grateful for it. I had way too much power, and I have no idea why. I kind of joined this company, that giant, massive retailer, and I was like, hey, I know things about Facebook, and I've been on 4chan. I don't know why that got me a job. Should not have. I know things about social media. I'll be good. And yeah, look at me now, I guess. Woohoo! I don't have time to go into this one, but it's really interesting. A lot of people, a lot smarter than me, have gone through and talked about I think they call it the pink ghetto of social media, where it was like, for the first time ever, there was gender parity. Interesting. Let's have a think about that for a bit. I'd encourage you to have a Google, because again, I don't have time to talk about it today, but yeah. So there's a thing called uses and gratifications theory that I want to, again, just hit you on the side of the head with. They taught it to me in university when I started to do a social science degree 2 years ago, because I thought, why not? Let's do that. Crazy. There's 4 reasons that they talked about back in the day, and I think this is like the 1940s. One was information. One was personal identity. Interesting that keeps coming up. One was integration and social interaction, and one was entertainment. I think that over time, that's changed, and I'm definitely going to touch on it a little bit. But let's talk about, for a second, viral marketing. Let's start with the one on the left. We've got Oreo back in the day. It was the year 2013. And again, Facebook likes is so important, right? And we were thinking about more and more ways to try and make that happen, more and more ways these 20-year-old women were somehow doing these things. They were considered to have won the Super Bowl. I don't know if anyone remembers, but there was like a giant blackout in the middle of the Super Bowl, and some genius tweeted, "Power out, no problem." And you can still dunk in the dark became the case study for, those agencies that just do the same, like, top 10 marketing, social viral marketing. This is always there forever. So if nothing else, they did a really good B2B play. At this point, though, viral marketing was happening in earnest. This is the origin of every social media marketer's worst nightmare, where their boss just comes up to them and goes, "Can you just, make it viral?" Because, yeah, someone groaned. Yes, exactly that. You think about Wendy's Twitter. You think about does anyone know what this one on the right is? Harlem Shake. Do you remember that? Do you remember doing the Harlem Shake? Do you remember being told by your boss, hey, we should all do the Harlem Shake? In the year 2014? No, it was horrifying. I guess where this comes from, though, is remember when I was talking about connection? Remember how that was super important? Yeah, it's not important anymore. Our individual identity, it's all about the community now, right? It's all about being seen to be part of something bigger, but most importantly, being seen to be part of something bigger first. It became this wave that you needed to ride. You needed to get on at just the right time. And getting on at just the right time was the important part. It had nothing to do with the connections you formed, with the people that you knew. It was all about timing. Surfing waves, that's all we did. Surfing digital waves. Please, if there's anything you take away from this, it's got nothing to do with my actual presentation. But we got to a point where brandjacking started to happen. And I need to talk about brandjacking because I put it in my goddamn talk descriptor and then did a whole talk that had nothing to do with it. But I want to talk about the fact that people started really feeling cringe about this stuff. If you got on the wave at the wrong time, it actually became a problem. You became considered as super cringe. How do you do, fellow kids? Is one of the top memes of all time because it's just a way to be you got on too late. which is like a real problem. You also see the 9/11 commemorative marketing posts. Does everybody remember those? They don't do those anymore. Thank God. What a time. But you know, it's really interesting to think about stuff like this because it was all about getting that like and chasing that like. But interestingly, no one really talked about how to get the like other than just be there early. So I put together a little slide and it's super blurry. So that's part of my engagement tactic. You can't see it. You're just going to be sitting there doing this. It's all a ploy. The most important thing, I guess, all of this aside, is it's gone beyond getting eyeballs. Gone are the days where just liking and sharing was a thing that happened in the early 2010s. Because we used to just do it. If you remember the uses gratification theory, there were so many different ways that we would engage with a thing. But now everybody's riding the same goddamn wave. We need to do something else for this, right? It needs to be more than just something you find interesting. So the definition of engagement has changed, and this is still mostly applicable. This has emerged, I would say, mid-2010s at this point. To bastardize Richard Dawkins' quote, the virus needs to be fed in order to continue spreading, and there's two ways to do it. Internally focused, i.e. identity-led, or externally focused, i.e. connections-led. Again, those two words, they keep coming up. Crazy. You know, curiously, again, this is a whole talk in and of itself, but ultimately at the end of the day, if you think about connection or identity, that was kind of where we were going as emergent community managers. We were like, this is how we do it. We fill their identity, fill their need for connection. It's gonna happen. Mostly it was identity, let's be real. Another one that I'm just gonna like dump and then walk away on, Twitch, am I right? Yep. Reddit, am I right? Totally a thing. Curiously, we had this whole period of homogenization, of everything diverging into one space, and everyone was there all at the same time in the same place. We all knew the blue dress, black dress, Yanni, Laurel, blah, blah, blah. Then we saw it splitting back off again, going back into the hyper niche. And at the time, I was like, yes, this is gonna be great. We're gonna be filling this, it's gonna be awesome. Only problem is that some of these micro communities, a bit antisocial, hey? Not chill, the way that I would put it. Not great. Let's talk about a life cycle of a community really quick. I'm gonna do it through the lens of my favorite shit posting Facebook group. Does anyone like follow Facebook group shit posting groups? Yeah, cool. So my favorite one is a Facebook group where we all pretend to be ants. Do you guys remember that? I think it's, okay, cool, great. Someone's learning something from this talk. So the year 2020 was a year, yeah? Sure was a year. This group called a Facebook group where we all pretend to be ants emerged. And it was a decidedly apocalyptic world at that point, so I think a lot of people were really leaning into absurdist content and absurdist humor. I'm sure a lot of people in this room nodding. A lot of us were like, oh man, this is great. This is so niche, it's got nothing to do with the pandemic. I can pretend to be an ant. All you did is you like type the word lift and bite sometimes and push. And that's all you ever did. And you put like spaces between the word and people would be like, oh no, the queen is missing. And it's like, run, hide, lift. It was great. Suddenly, the problem was, or you know, mainstream engagement happened. There were BuzzFeed articles about it. And I'm sure there's some sort of like insect joke I could make, but I'm not gonna do it because I can't. All of a sudden there were massive swarms. There we are, insect joke. A true ant colony in lots of ways. And they started coordinating raids on other shitposting groups. So they would go into other shitposting groups and be like, lift! And people would be like, what is happening right now? I have no idea what's happening. It was really funny. But then tribalism started to happen. You had a bunch of people, this niche thing became really mainstream. Suddenly it wasn't serving everybody's identity. And people were like, I feel really political for some reason. And other people were like, lift! What's happening? It didn't meet everybody's expectations, and conflict started to happen. And so what happens then is toxicity. And the Facebook group where we all pretend to be ants got ruined by the ants. And I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that there was a really flimsy identity connection there, right? Like, we weren't ants. What were we doing? There were too many. It was 2020, I don't know, man. It was really a time. And then we hit 2014, right? Like 4 years before, but it's kind of all, this is why X-Men is being used here, because that entire series, who the hell knows what's going on, right? That's my whole cover for doing this in just the most insane order. But I think this is when the wheels started to fall off. Like looking back, looking with the benefit of hindsight, 2014, something happened. Don't know if anyone remembers Gamergate, but again, whole talk, I said it out loud, the internet's coming, I'm gonna leave right now. But for real, a lot of people a lot smarter than me have been able to document the connection between what happened in 2014 and what happened in 2016, which I definitely won't be talking about in this talk. But extremism became an identity pillar. It became a way that these micro communities could connect on, and those connections became mainstream. And so they had the niche footing, they started to gain traction. We saw the age of Reddit, something that has existed prior, but it started to get peak popularity. So we saw people hunting for the Boston bomber. We saw people nearly tanking Wall Street only recently. Whole games getting tanked at the time. Huge campaigns were being, created by, I'm not going to say ants, but you can see like the connection being made here and that swarming behavior that happens. Things stopped being connections based on connection. Connections based on connection. Communities based on connection. They became predominantly about identity. And the ant group, funny, when it's about like racism, not so great, not ideal in general. It also didn't help a lot of our strategies as community managers was like, gather a bunch of people under the identity of fandom. Cool, that's it. Just a brief aside as well, if you haven't followed the like GME, Wall Street bets, all that sort of stuff, definitely encourage you. There's like a Netflix documentary that recently came out about it. It's very good. It's like a good, like, in case you don't know anything about stocks or Reddit or all of that sort of stuff, it kind of gives you an understanding. It also gives you like the community behavior context at the time, which is really, really interesting. So definitely recommend it. Let's go to 2021. So it's NFT gaming at this point. It's exploding, consciousness of our identity, everyone's talking about it. People have very, very strong opinions on it. I took a job, and there's a bunch of people in this audience right now that were at that job. It was an NFT game. Honestly, one of the good ones, like truly. Its main selling point was true ownership. They had a really, really dedicated community. They had a lot of really, really talented people working on the project that were awesome. It was all next level. It wasn't that game. We don't talk about that game. Unfortunately, one of the things that I saw is a community that was like toxic, but not in a way that was like overt racism. It was more that entitlement that I'm sure you've heard about, you've heard chatter about, and that entitlement was insane at the time. And I remember going, what's going on here? And so I was thinking about it in a lot of ways, and I was thinking the only risk in community management was those four community needs that I talked about: identity, trust, participation, reward. And I was like, one of these things isn't being fulfilled. That's what's happening. That's the problem here. Games in general have already been over-indexing in identity, right? And reward is already inbuilt. That's why games communities are so powerful. We've seen the toxic spill out when that stuff gets too high. And what I was seeing with Web3 was it was kind of taking it to the next level. And this is where the talk gets a bit grim. Sorry. I could talk about ants the whole time, but like, then we'll learn nothing. So let's talk about the community as the product. So in NFT games communities, they don't consider the community as one holistic collection of people. It's not just like one player. We've got the player identity, the different reasons why people play, and it's all game oriented still. It's still based on what you want to be doing or achieving within the context of a game. But what we see in Web3 is 3 different types. So we see players, as we know them, we see earners, we see investors. So it's really interesting, like with hyper-casual gaming, NFT games have kind of added a whole new profile of players in general. So Axie Infinity was the screenshot that I shared previously. They're probably one of the more egregious examples of what's happening here. And they've built the community foundationally on what you can extract from the economy. So it's all about value extraction. To be fair to NFT games in general and Web3 in general, there's plenty of communities that exist in Web3 that are actually building really great stuff. There are people that are there because they're connecting for something bigger. It's not just the money that you can be making. But the problem is, it comes down to the purpose of a community gathering in the first place, and that is the thing that I see as becoming a bigger and bigger problem. A lot of games are being marketed and built purely to create the hype. And that hype is there, is what's feeding a community, and they're there because they see speculative value and they go, I'm going to make a bunch of money off this. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. I'm going to get all my friends. Suddenly it looks like an MLM scheme, and that is concerning to me because you saw what happened at the beginning with, your disinterested, your detractor. Suddenly, once extrinsic value is the main thing that comes out of a community, you've put everything into hyperdrive. You've heightened the stakes significantly. That community engagement cycle is happening. The wheels are coming off. It's spinning faster and faster and faster. This was one of the biggest problems that I was seeing, is that everybody was a detractor because everyone had a reason to be. They were all shareholders at this point. It wasn't just that they were there because it was a fun time. There were way more higher stakes. And you saw what happened with the ant colony. It's going to be worse. So let's go to the Metaverse for a second. I knew I was going to get that reaction, so I literally just put that in for that reason. So let's talk about what Zuckerberg defines as the Metaverse. I'm just going to say it, and then I'm going to pause. A network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. Is it though, Zuckerberg? What do we say it's that? The Metaverse, in that definition, has been around since the days of MUDs, the days of RuneScape. We don't need to create this VR thing, dude. It's here. We already see digital economies that exist based on World of Warcraft. None of this stuff is new, so what's different? And I think that is what you can get out of it money-wise. And that's a bit of a concern for me. The commodification of the community is the problem, as far as I see it. If you're looking at your community as a commodity, if you're looking at it as a product, if you're looking at it as, I have no idea what he's doing there, it's terrifying. Can you see the similarity? That wasn't on purpose. I literally just noticed that. Cool. Terrifying. So let's go back to that community life cycle again for a second. What I think happens within the life cycle of a single community, like ant colony, et cetera, it's actually happening in our broader digital society at large. So I don't know for sure what happens next. I'm not actually Wolverine. I know, surprising. It's probably not good though, hey. It's probably not a good thing. What we've done and what I've done as a community manager is we've taken shortcuts and we've made our communities into commodities. And what was a natural social evolution based on forming connection, it's now a commercial entity and it's come at the cost of trust. So trust, see you later. No one, why? You don't need to trust anyone if you're making money off them. That's not the purpose of being here. We're prioritizing a model, and I want to be really clear, this is not, Web3 is a symptom And it is not the problem. I think a lot of people get up here and go, oh, NFTs are evil. Dude, no, it is where we're headed collectively. Value extraction is inherently inconsistent with what we want to be achieving with a community in a best case scenario. If our identities are built on value extraction, it's not going to be good. It's doomed to fail. We're seeing like emotes. Remember me talking about MUDs and how like emoticons are a thing and it was a way to like project your identity and communicate with other people? We're selling them now. They're things that are being sold in Fortnite. That's not Web3. That's just a thing that we're doing. Where high engagement has become the main thing. My job is to create engagement. My job's not to create trust. So what does that look like? Probably should have given some sort of warning that this like really veers off a cliff, but that's fine. I think what we're going to see probably is that communities are going to become more engaged. They're going to become more niche and split and value extraction based. Identity misalignment is going to happen way more. Like we're going to see like heaps of raids on each other. Like the ants are going to go everywhere. It's going to be a crazy time. There's going to be more toxicity. So, we think we have a problem now. It's really going to get worse. Sorry, guys. It's going to become the norm. That's going to just be what we expect. And community managers that aren't correctly tasked with fixing this problem at the root, they're just going to be there being like this if you hate the other thing, and it's just not going to work well. We're also probably, like, as an aside, going to see a whole generation of people, and we're already starting to see it with Gen Z, completely disengaging entirely, being like, nah, not for me. People going to therapy and just not anymore. Like I've spent way less time on Twitter right now than I have in my entire life, and I've never felt better. All the value businesses that could be getting from those people, gone, because they're like, nope, not for me, not a good time. We'll probably see trust completely disintegrate. So we'll go back to like the original time where trust was implicitly not there, but it's going to be not there because it was damaged, which is very different. It's going to be, the behavior is going to be akin to what we already see in spaces that are predominantly anonymous. And I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't seem like a good time. So how do I make this hopeful? From here on out, though, as a professional in this industry, my focus has been on trust and connection. And it has been at the cost of engagement. It has been at the cost of getting likes. It has been at the cost of seeing as millions of people come into the ecosystem, because the most important thing, as I see it, for us for the next 10 years is to be building that trust back and making it about connection. We need to put our focus back to that being the core. Yes, short-term pain, but I think that there's a long-term gain there. And I think that as community managers and people who hire community managers and work with community managers, that needs to be the thing that we all collectively agree is the most important thing. So I challenge you, like, regardless of whether you're a community manager or someone who works with one, have a think about the communities that you're a part of and the ones that maybe you manage them, maybe you're in the ant colony Facebook group, in which case, lift. But what is something that you can do today to bring that trust back? I would really challenge you to think about that. Anyway, that's me. Did I go like 50 minutes? What was my time?
40.
Yes, I've got 10 minutes for questions. That way it doesn't have to end so grim. If you have questions, more than welcome to go up on the non-intimidating microphone over there. I won't intimidate you, I promise. Or we could just sit here. Like, that's fine too. Oh, we got people. No, unfortunately, you need to talk into the microphone because it gets recorded, and so they were very specific about that. They're like, make them talk in the microphone.
All right, so this is totally hypothetical, but let's say you work for a company and your boss gives you KPIs that are solely based on numbers when you want to focus on building trust and building a healthy, inclusive community.
Yep.
Do you have any tips on pushing back?
Show them this talk, maybe.
Perfect.
But for real, I think that one of the things that I focus on when I think about having hard conversations with my leadership is how do you pull it into a business objective, right? And that was the reason why I added that line of like, people are going to turn off entirely, because those people are potential customers.
Yeah.
So you actually have a commercial interest in making sure you're creating that safety, because otherwise you have a huge potential people that you could be selling to that you're just not gonna. So I would definitely encourage that. I also think that individual community managers can't fix this. Like, I think this needs to be a collective thing. This needs to be something that leadership are understanding of in its entirety. So don't let the
I'll
world
send
be
them
on your
your
shoulders.
Twitter handle.
Yeah, my Twitter
yeah.
specifically. Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Oh yeah, that might be a good idea.
There we go. Sweet as. Thank you. Actually, it might be easier if I swing this around. Yeah, that's all cool. So I actually have a quick question, because I know a lot of games companies have had a lot of trouble trying to help improve their communities and provide safety for a lot of the users. So even just when it comes to things like reporting, if there's harassment, or if there is just things like hate raids,
Yep.
that has become quite hard for people to be able to find safety.
Yep.
And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions for how a community manager or a games company might go about putting in tools in place to help create that safety and sense of trust, so that the community not only can continue to act freely, but also have that benefit that if something does go wrong, that they have some sense of control or sense of well-being and safety still.
Absolutely. And I am the kind of person that is very, let's work it out of the day. It'll be fine. And this is one of the few areas where I'm like, no, you need documentation. You need a plan, because what happens when something catches fire is you don't think about the safety blanket. You go, oh my God, there's a fire, holy shit. And you don't pay attention to what the process should be. So it needs to be very well documented. You need to have somebody, ideally, with experience in these things. Australian Community Managers is a group of community managers made in Australia. They have a lot of associate companies that work alongside of them. They have a lot of documented process. They have people who are experts in it. You can reach out to them if you're a small indie studio and you don't have a huge amount of resources. That would be my first port of call that I would encourage you, if you can't be hiring these community managers that have the experience and the documented history of knowing what can go wrong. But yeah, to kind of TLDR, what is a very big concern is something that, again, I could have a whole talk about, documentation.
I guess even with some companies, they've gone into the point of hiring security teams for
Totally.
staff members who have been maintaining community feedback, because even their staff members who have been mods have been threatened and had doxing and
Exactly.
death threats at them. So yeah,
it's something that I think over the next few years is going to become really critical. For even big businesses don't get it right. Even big businesses don't have the safety inbuilt. It's something that we're going to see become worse before it gets better, unfortunately. To be grim again. Sorry, everyone.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
She kind of already answered my question.
Oh, great. Perfect. We've got someone else. Awesome.
So, great talk. I was wondering if there was a way to get numbers or metrics on the amount of users you're losing, because at the end of the day, when it comes to business decisions like monetizing your users, hard numbers are what matters to make a case. So is there any way of turning this into hard numbers?
I think that there's a world where it's possible, but you've got to think about it from the lens of businesses don't have problems buying billboards. And there are no hard numbers on them. You've got an approximate idea. We've kind of all established that it's totally a thing. But there are things in this world that, my entire career I've come up against. You've got to have hard numbers. And there are things that we're getting a lot more, good about. UTM tags, thank God, right? But to be real, there will be some things that businesses just have to trust that this is a cultural issue. Doesn't necessarily, one that right now we have hard numbers for, but I guess the thing is when you have people originally joining that wave of viral marketing, They didn't have numbers for that, and they did really well because they took the punt on it. I guess this is that, but in reverse. So like, you know. Cool.
Thank you.
5 minutes left. Anybody else? Oh, hello.
Outside of your Twitter handle, what other resources to better potentially prepare community managers that have dabbled in the space, but not spent as much time as say you have? What other resources are out there so that we can go into potentially positions like that down the road and have the tools to navigate those conversations?
So globally, CMX Hub is amazing for theory around community management. There's also a lot of practical resources. They do conferences, so if you're in the position to be going to digital conferences or getting your work to pay for them, definitely encourage that if community theory is something that you're interested in. Australian community managers, as I said earlier, I worked for a company called Quip for a little while. I see someone who works there now. They are an amazing trove and wealth of information, and they're very, very generous with it for community practitioners, as we call them. So yeah, definitely encourage those resources. And also just like, there are communities for community managers, and I encourage joining them because everyone's very generous with their time. Hello.
I mean, community management obviously is a whole role that maybe isn't as supported as well by other games roles. What can other games roles do to better support community managers in this time of things changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we are all part of a broader community, obviously games industry community, but that aside, none of us exist in a silo anymore. If we exist somewhere digitally, chances are we're part of at least a few communities. I think one of the most important positive things that I encourage from a practical standpoint as a community manager is making sure that we're amplifying the advocates and the people who are existing in a positive way. So if you can be that advocate, if you can be that point of positivity, that's really, really critical to having a community manager be able to turn something around. So I know it's a bit of a trite answer, but it really is super, super helpful. Cool. I think that's me. Thank you for coming, everybody.